All right, I'll go ahead and start that recording. So hi everyone, my name is Dasha. I'm one of the tutors at Kweller Prep, and I'm also a graduate of Hunter College High School. So I've been in your children's shoes taking this exam, and I went to this great school. I had a wonderful time at Hunter, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the test or the school. Today is part of 3 days of webinars about the Hunter test. So if you tuned in Monday and Tuesday, we talked about the English portion and the math portion. And today we're going to be talking about the essay portion. As we go along, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll also be able to stay back a little bit to answer any other questions you might have. So we talked a little bit about this the past 2 days, and I don't want to spend too much time, but to very briefly recap what the Hunter exam looks like if you are joining us for the first time. It is a 3-hour exam that consists of 50 multiple choice English questions, a writing assignment, and 30 multiple choice math questions. During the test, the reading and math are weighed the same. So I mentioned this the other 2 days that we'll talk more about how this is all graded today, because the essay portion is really critical here. So the first half is reading and math, the multiple choice that's graded on a Scantron. And then the top scorers are selected to have their essay read. And then that essay becomes the sole criteria for admission. And that's pretty challenging and daunting, and our program is designed to work around that. That first, we really want to meet the threshold that we're at a comfortable stage to meet the multiple choice, and then we really sharpen our writing skills to make sure our essay is also selected. Since it's a 3-hour exam given in one packet, and they tell you on the instructions that as soon as you finish one section, go on to the next, monitor the time the proctor writes on the board. This is their version, this is their way of saying that students have to manage their own time. You have your packet and you have 3 hours, and they say you can do whatever you want with that time. So that's a pretty big responsibility to manage your own 3 hours, to decide when it's time to move on from one section to another. So the proctors in the room are typically teachers or students at the school who kind of walk around to monitor activity in the classroom, obviously look out for cheating and things like that, but also manage time, hand out materials, things like that. So they're people who are organizing the test. There's always someone around, right? If you need to use the bathroom, I need to know where to go, and so forth. There's people always in the room watching. But they won't tell you how to take the test or when to move on and so forth. And that's a really important skill that you have to learn as you test prep. So because you have 3 hours and 3 sections, it is our general recommendation that you spend 1 hour per section. And as I spoke about on Monday and Tuesday, this can vary a little bit based on each individual person's strengths and weaknesses. So if I'm very good at math and I know that I can knock out that math section in, let's say, 45 minutes, maybe I'll need those extra 15 minutes for the reading section. But it should still generally be in the rough area of an hour, plus or minus, let's say, 10-ish minutes. So that's the format of the exam. Let's talk about what the essay looks like. So the essay is, they put it in the middle of your test, but like we said, you can do it in any order you want. Part of our strategy at Kweller is teaching you the different ways that you can organize it. So whether you want to do your essay first, middle, or last. Our recommendation is to do it in the middle. This way you know you're able to definitely complete it, and you won't run out of time, and it gives you a break between the multiple choice sections. But because during the Kweller, classes, you take different diagnostic tests every couple of weeks, you actually have a really great opportunity to try different ways and see what works for you individually, because there's no one formula that fits all. And this is what the essay page will look like. So they'll give you the prompt. So this one was the prompt from 2015. describe a time when you challenged a belief or idea, and they give you 2 white pages that are lined. Now, seems pretty standard, but why am I pointing this out? Because you have these 2 pages and they're wider lines and loose leaves, so there's a little bit less space than you might think. And the way it works is that these pages are separated from your test booklet and given to the proctors to read. So in the past, and this may change given that a lot of tests are becoming digital, but in the past, the Hunter test has been pen and paper, or pencil and paper, and they read your handwritten work. And everything that fits within the parameters of these 2 pages is the only thing they see. That has a lot of implications for us. What does that mean? That means that if I'm running out of space, I can't get a 3rd page. That means if I made a mistake and I have to cross everything out, they'll see that. I won't get a new page to start over or anything like that. You do have scrap paper, and we want to use that scrap paper very effectively by outlining. And we'll talk more about that. But just a glimpse of what does this essay even look like? It's 2 pages, it's handwritten. As we talked about before, the essay is graded after the exam. So you must qualify in the multiple choice to have your essay even considered. Now, this is a little bit daunting because that means, and it's a little bit upsetting because it means that if you don't qualify by the multiple choice, they won't ever even see your essay. Even if it was the best essay that anyone has ever written in the history of test taking, it will never be seen. So that is typically why in our test prep courses, we talk about the essay usually a little bit later on, just because we want to make sure that we can get through this threshold of the multiple choice to have this be worthwhile. And regardless, I always say this about every section, but I will say it for the essay too, that the writing skills that you build in the Hunter Kweller classes are writing skills that will carry you through any essay you will write in the future. So these numbers that I have up, this is rough estimates from prior years. I know that the criteria for taking the test has changed recently because of the score requirements and how students can apply, so this might no longer be accurate. But in the past, you would have to be invited to take the test. Now it's anyone who qualifies can themselves register to take the test. But it has been that there's roughly 3,000 students who take the test. About 500 of them qualify meeting the multiple choice minimum. And there is no numerical minimum to be met. It was the top 500 people. So I can't give you a numerical score of, oh, it was 90% or 50%. It tended to hover around 65, 70%. But you can't use these metrics as a strict cutoff because it really just depends on that year. So it was the top 500 scores, and those 500 essays were read and graded against each other. And of those essays, the top 150 essays were chosen. This is a pretty complicated testing sequence for a number of reasons. And that makes it difficult to study for as well. Because once you make it into that top 500, it doesn't matter if you scored 100% on the multiple choice, or if you just barely made it past the threshold to have your essay read. And that essay becomes the sole component. So if you have an okay essay, but 100%, versus you have a very good essay, and you just made it to that 70%, it doesn't matter. Only your essay score matters. So we tend to say that once your child is scoring generally in a comfortable place where we feel like they will generally make this threshold, extra time should be used to really fine-tune the essay and not the multiple choice. And of course, as you see, it's a pretty slippery slope and we have to be very careful. But that's the grading criteria. A good question is, if the test is digital, how soon will we know? Unfortunately, we have no idea. As soon as we know, we will relay that information to our students in our classes. We don't know if it will even be digital, so right, we can't predict any of this. We can only hope that if the school does do that, that they will, inform us as soon as possible and give people time to prepare. But students now, I know, type a lot in school, so they're building those skills just, in their regular classes. But I wouldn't be too worried about that. So that's our grading criteria. Now at the bottom, we have what it looks like. First, we have the planning page, and that page is not seen by the people reviewing the essays. That's a blank page where you can outline, you can write your notes, and so forth. Because it's a relatively short essay, but also pretty long in that it's 2 pages and it has to be structured and all these other things we'll talk about, it's really important to outline. It's not something that can just, your stream of consciousness, just answer the prompt and write a story. There's a lot more to it, and so outlining it becomes very, very important. And then you have the 2 pages of the essay that the graders will see. And here's the criteria that the essay is graded on. So in our Kweller classes, every essay is hand graded and is provided explanations and comments throughout the page. So this is great because every time your child submits an essay, whether it's for homework or for the test, they will get very specific feedback, which I really encourage reviewing thoroughly. It's not just about the number, because the numbers are subjective, but it's about what can be done differently and what needs to be improved on. And I think that's a very good element of our Kweller classes. So let's talk about what this criteria is. Grammar, spelling, and punctuation. That is one of the sections. So each sentence must be a complete sentence, right? You have to have a subject and a verb. Your tenses have to be consistent. You have to generally have good spelling. They won't take necessarily points off for misspelling, a very strong vocabulary word that you're trying to use and you simply messed up, but they will take off for commonly misspelled words or if you have excessive spelling errors, right? None of us are perfect. We're not, we don't have spell check. So it doesn't have to be necessarily perfect, but it should generally flow smoothly. And same with grammar, right? Making sure you have capitalization, periods, etc. So these are important things, even though they seem like they're very simple and foundational to writing. 2, use of advanced vocabulary and transitions, right? This also is very much related to grammar, spelling, and punctuation. The flow of the writing matters. Someone is reading this, so they want to see that the ideas connect, that there's transition words between them. And same with vocabulary. You want to show that you have a good knowledge of vocab words, of essay writing, and so forth. So you can see the criteria for that. What else was I going to say there? Okay, next one is, we might come back to that one. Next one was organization of ideas. So in the criteria there, it says essay starts with a hook and a thesis. So in class, we talk a lot about what a thesis is and how we create one. Our ideas have to be well organized. They're not just in one paragraph and are clearly stated in the topic sentence, and our main ideas are seen throughout. So we talk a lot about what the structure of our essay looks like. Typically, it will be an introductory paragraph with our thesis and our reasons, and then 2 to 3 body paragraphs and a conclusion. This is particularly where I say it's important to have our outline and our planning page, because I can't just construct an organized 5-paragraph essay off the top of my head. I need to brainstorm. I need to put my ideas on paper. Maybe I need to move them around. And then I can use my outline as almost like a checklist while as I start writing. So that once I complete a portion or an idea, I can just mark it off. They say here that students must use at least 7 words per line. What they're referring to is penmanship. There is no exact number, right? It doesn't have to be exactly 7 words per line, but I think Kweller likes to use it that way to say your handwriting shouldn't be too big and it shouldn't be too small. It should be legible, right? A big thing that I say, whether it's the graders at Kweller or the graders on the real test, they are reading 500 essays. If I'm going through 500 papers and I come across yours and it's so difficult to read, I have to really, hone in just to even get through your handwriting, immediately it's not going to get a strong score. If your handwriting is so big that you can't fit, your full 4 or 5 paragraphs, or vice versa, if it's so small that we have to squint to see it, it just creates a bad tone for even starting to read the essay. So if you don't have good handwriting, it's something to start working on. And it's something that will help you everywhere else. And if you were here and joined us yesterday, you might remember that I talked about that for the math as well. That differentiating between a 1 and a 7 and a decimal point or so forth, organization matters there too. Having good handwriting matters everywhere. So it's something to work on. And then lastly, addresses the prompt and answers the question. That should be clear up front. So that's why we say there must be a thesis, and that thesis must carry through the essay. It's not a stream of consciousness, everything that comes to mind about the topic I talk about it. It's organized. Here's my answer, here's what supports it, and here's all my reasoning for my support. It seems pretty simple to just talk about it, but it's a lot harder to put all these pieces together when you are writing this within an hour. So here's our structure that we talked about. We have our introduction that generally has a catchy hook, generalizes the topic, gives our answer, right, in the thesis, and gives our supporting reasons. So my favorite place in New York is X because of A, B, and C. Then I have my 2 or 3 body paragraphs. Each one has one topic. Use show not tell. We talk about that in class a lot, about how we can visually tell the story rather than just give the facts, right? Because it's a personal story, but it's also an essay. Figurative language, clear flow of ideas, transition words, and so forth. We have a lot of different versions of these structures and a lot of checklists that we go through. And lastly, of course, the conclusion. So we want to summarize everything we said from start to finish, put a nice bow on our essay, and complete it. We don't want to repeat what we said, but we want to make sure we bring it back to the beginning and rephrase and come back to our thesis to show I gave this essay its full value, its full time, and I finished it. I wanted to read along with you guys a sample essay so to get an idea of what a good Hunter essay looks like. Before we get to that, a couple of questions that came up in the chat, and I really appreciate everyone asking questions. Feel free to add more. What score do we need to qualify? Like I said, there is no exact score. You want to score as high as possible. It has been around, let's say, 65, 70. But again, some tests are harder, some tests are easier, some years are different. This year is going to be different. There's no fine line. And I think that applies to the other question about what score should we transition from multiple choice to working on the essays. I think because there's no exact, numerical, once you feel very comfortable, is when we can really start fine-tuning the essay. If you're like, I gave this test my all, right? I answered every question I knew. I tried to go back and use my context clues. I checked. I did everything I can. In class and in the Kweller courses, we work on essays all the time throughout, right? So it's not like we spend all this time on the reading and math and then only get to the essay at the end. So it's something that we build in throughout. Every sentence does not need to be 7 words. Like I said, it depends on handwriting, and it's not something that we'd expect you to ever count, and not something that anyone will count for you. It just means it was just a general range of, if you have good handwriting, you should fit about 7, right? Don't have your handwriting shouldn't be so big that it only fits a couple of words, and it shouldn't be so small that you can fit a paragraph on a line. So just have good judgment. Make sure it's legible, and the graders will absolutely let you know. Okay. Other questions. Where should your child be scoring on the essays at this moment? That's very subjective. What we want to see is growth over the course. So some students have very strong writing curriculums in school already and are doing really well. Some students don't really write a lot of essays in school, so they start much lower. So there's no good threshold of saying, by October 15th, we should be scoring a 5 or a 6 or an 8. You want to see growth over time, so it absolutely varies. There is also, so Kweller also runs an essay class, and I used to spearhead that class and loved it so much. I think it's a great class, regardless of the Hunter test, because it does also prep other styles of essays. It doesn't exclusively focus on the Hunter essay, but it does really great. It has really great value for it. You can see, usually, you'll see if the grades aren't progressing on the essay and you're really worried about it, you could say, if the writing class will add value to it. I always recommend it for everyone because I think it will help in school. It will help for the Hunter tests. It will help for any tests that involves an essay that they will take in the future. It's a really great class. What the essay will be about, we're going to get through in a moment. We'll talk about it. We don't obviously know what the essay will be for each year coming up, but we do know what prior years were. So we can base our ideas of what it could be about based on what it has been in the past. And we'll talk about that shortly. So that being said, thank you all for questions. Feel free to add more. Let's turn to this sample essay. I'll read it out loud, and you are welcome to read alongside with us. So this is the prompt from 2007. Describe a journey through a day in New York City. New York City is my favorite city in the world, and I'm grateful to have been raised in such a diverse and colorful environment. There is always something to do and somewhere to go in New York. One can never get bored. While most of my week consists of going to school, participating in after-school activities, programs, and doing my homework when I finally return home, Saturdays are very meaningful days for me. On Saturday, I truly get to journey through New York City as I go to art school, where I learn how to draw and spend time with my friends and go to the library afterwards. Saturdays are a special day of the week for me. I get to go to art school. Ever since I was a toddler, I've loved to draw. My parents gave me a whiteboard as a gift, and I was always scribbling on it. We have a photograph at home of the very first drawing I ever made when I was 2, of a potato-looking person. When I began kindergarten, I kept doodling on every surface I could get my hands on. My mom interpreted this as a talent waiting to be uncovered and honed, and so she promptly signed me up for art school on the weekends. Starting at 5 years old, I've woken up at 9 a.m. every Saturday morning to drive with my father to the Bridgeview School of Fine Arts. Bridgeview is located in the artistic Long Island City, a neighborhood now trendy and gentrified with hip galleries and exhibitions. The art studio is based in a building where many artists have their own individual studios. Each week, my teacher presents me with a drawing or painting by an old master that I need to replicate, with still life or a real life model to capture onto paper. Her technique is is to just present me with the assignment, let me run wild, and correct me along the way should I need it. At Bridgeview, I've learned, and continue to learn today, more about art history, chiaroscuro, and perspective and anatomy. It has fostered within me a deeper love for drawing that I know I will keep and cherish for the rest of my life. I also met two of my best friends at Bridgeview, Monica and Rebecca. We all go to different schools, and the girls are both a year older than me. We are also all fairly different. Monica wants to be an interior designer when she grows up. Rebecca hopes to be an English professor, and I want to be a lawyer. However, none of these differences matter to us. We sit next to each other during every class and often get hushed by our teachers because we can't stop talking and giggling. I have definitely learned a lot from both Monica and Rebecca, not just about friendship, but about drawing. We try to help each other in any way we can, with suggestions about how to improve each other's work and technique. I will always be grateful for Bridgeview for bringing us together. Lastly, when art school ends for the day, my father takes me to the library. The Queen's Library in Long Island City is only a few minutes drive away from Bridgeview, and I look forward to this trip every week. When we arrive, I immediately pounce the children's and young adult section and pile up the tables with books upon books. Sometimes I don't even have enough time during the week to finish all the books that I borrow. Every trip to the library feels like an adventure to me. I have read many of the books in my school's library, and I love being surrounded by all of these adventures I have not yet taken. Going to the library is a fundamental part of my journey through New York City. While the journeys I take through in New York City mainly consist of school-related activities, Saturdays are very special for me. Every week I attend art school where I learn to draw and spend quality time with two of my closest friends, and I go to the library afterward. The journey has exposed me to the neighborhood of Long Island City, which I had not visited often before. I look forward to continuing this weekly routine for a long time. All right, so that's the essay. These are our 2 pages. And there's a couple of things that I like to point out about this essay that make it particularly successful. First of all, if you've been listening to kind of the structure and the qualities that are in the rubric for it, you can notice how they're prevalent here. First of all, we have a thesis and what we call our roadmap. Describe a journey. Here it is. On Saturdays, I get to journey through New York City, right? They didn't just say a journey through a day in New York City is, but they explain it. They tell us their journey on Saturdays. They go to art school where they learn how to draw, right? I put that as number 1. That's their first reason. Spend time with my friends. That's our second reason. And they go to the library afterward. Third reason. Now take a look. What was our first paragraph about? Going to art school. What was our second paragraph about? The friends. And the third paragraph, the library. And what happened in the conclusion and the last paragraph, they tell us again, I attend art school, I learn how to draw. 2, spend quality time with 2 of my friends. And 3, go to the library after. So they give us the 3 reasons, the 3 points they're going to make. They make the 3 points, and then they tell us about these 3 points they just made. And I think that's one of the things that makes this essay very successful. The second reason I really like this essay is because we learn a lot about this person. I always remind students that, over the course of the program, I get to know them pretty well, right? We learn about each other's extracurricular activities, what, our interests are, and so forth. But whoever is reading your essay at Hunter has no idea who you are. They don't know what school you go to. They don't know what activities you participate in, and so forth. They know that you're a 6th grader in a New York City middle school. That's it. So everything else is up to you to show them. And so I would ask you to think, what did we learn about this person? We learned that they've always had a love for drawing. We learned that they participate in some after-school activities, don't know which ones. We learn a little bit about their family. And then we learn about this art school that they go to. To me, they seem pretty inquisitive, right? They're thinking about the neighborhood that they're going to. That Long Island City is now trendy and gentrified with hip galleries and exhibitions. They're observant of their surroundings. What else? We learn about what they're actually learning in art school. And it seemed to me, as someone who's not an artist, I find this pretty impressive. They learn about art history, some kind of art that I might not even know, perspective, anatomy. Sounds pretty impressive for a 6th grader taking an art class. Then what else do we know? We very subtly learn that they want to be a lawyer, which is pretty cool. We learn about their friends. We try to help each other. We know that this person is collaborative. We know that this person would probably be a good friend to someone in school, right? When we read students' work, and when students read sample essays, I like to ask them, I say, would you be friends with this person? Would you want to work with them on a school project? And you want to present, and when you write an essay, you want to present yourself in a similar positive light, right? This person says we try to help each other in any way we can with suggestions about how to improve each other's work and technique. That's pretty cool, right? You don't have to say that I'm a kind and helpful person, but if you show it, it does the job really well. What else do we learn? We learn that then they go to the library and that they love to read. That's great for a student to have a love for reading, right? And then they sum it all up. So this is one example of a good essay. So let me answer some of the questions about this essay before we go on to the next section. So like I said before, we don't know what the essay is about, but it typically has been a personal essay. And that's a really important element about these essays. I tend to break up Hunter essays into 3 main categories. It's personal, it's formal, and it's structured. And this essay did all 3. It tells us a personal story. It's written still formally, right? I'm not just telling it to you like a fiction book. I'm not just giving you the plot. It's actually a formal essay. And third, it's structured. We have to have paragraphs. We have to have an introduction, conclusion, and body paragraphs. So this particular essay, I believe, was written by a student for a practice exam. Obviously, we can't have, we don't have students as real exams, real essays from the exams, but these are from practice tests. That's usually where we get them from. And then some of the ones that we use for samples will work with the student to hone them. So other good questions. Do we need to provide a straightforward thesis, or is there a specific way to phrase this? There's a lot of ways to phrase it. There is no one right answer. And we look at a lot of sample essays in classes to look at different ways to do this. But the short answer is yes, there has to be somewhere in there a pretty straightforward answer. Now, what I don't like to see is a complete repetition of the question. So if the question is describe a journey and you say a journey is, but if it should flow with your paragraph like it does here. On Saturdays, I get to journey through New York City as I go to art school. We have the word journey in there. We have the key words that point us to, here I am answering the question, right? You never want to have a reader going through your introduction and saying, when am I going to get to the answer, right? It should be very clear. Another great question. Does the essay have to be about the student themselves, about a lesson? Does it need to be inspiring? So most of the time, the essays are personal. So yes, they should be about the student themselves, their real life activities, their real life stories. Sometimes lessons fit into this. In fact, this student subtly included actually a couple of lessons that they've learned. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a lesson unless the prompt asks for it. And does it need to be inspiring? Also, no. Sometimes elements of it come into play, sometimes it fits, but it's not a requirement. Does it have to be casual or formal? It is formal. I think I mentioned that. What is chiaroscuro? I actually don't know. I'm not an art student, but that's something to look up. Is there a certain personality that you should be portraying? Yes. And it's anything that is positive. And there's so many, so many positive features about you. And you're not going to be able to incorporate all of them in one essay, right? This person who wrote this essay, they're not two-dimensional either. This is not their full story. And there's so much more to them. But they can give us a little glimpse about them in this essay, just like you can in yours. So yeah, you can show collaboration. You can show your drive. You can show, your talent for something. You can show your passions, your bravery. Any great positive personality, you should show something, right? You want to present yourself as, this is in a way your interview to Hunter. That's another way I like to look at this essay. You can't give your whole life story and still answer the question, but you can give us a glimpse into something that will make the readers think, hey, this person's really cool. They would totally fit into Hunter. So that's a really great question, and it's something we also like to focus on as part of our writing prep. Are 3 body paragraphs required? No. Sometimes, usually you wouldn't go more just because you won't have the space. So if you have managed to fit 4 body paragraphs, I would wonder if they're too short. But we do say 2 is usually acceptable. So 2 or 3 body paragraphs. Okay. What is a good catchphrase to start off an essay? There is no right answer. We do say we like a hook, something that's engaging. I really like when students give like a description of something, use very good, descriptive language and adjectives, and paint us a picture of something that they'll explain. That's one way to do it. Maybe it's a glimpse of like a story of like, and here I am on the diving board waiting for, the buzzer to ring, so I jump in the water or something like that. But lots of different ways to do it. Yeah, even this way is good too. They start broad here. They start, it's my favorite city. I'm grateful to have been raised in such a diverse and colorful environment. Cool. Right off the bat, we learn something about them. There's no one way to do it. And we read a ton of different examples to see different ways of doing it and practice so many different ways of doing it. So some of the other questions I want to address coming up, so stay tuned. Here's another, this is from 2024. So last year, they switched it up a little bit. They gave a poem, and then in the directions said, read each question carefully, think about your answers, blah, blah, blah. Read the prompts and the passage above and answer each question using 1 paragraph. So this was a switch up. It's not their typical essay. We don't know if they're going to repeat this or not. But it still fit everything that students have learned, because it says prompt 1, choose 1 line from the poem and explains how it develops upon the poem's central metaphor. So this is essentially a reading comprehension question, something that students have been prepping for all semester. So you read the poem, you have 1 lengthy good paragraph answering this question, and 2, use vivid sensory details, recount a difficult experience, and explain how hope helped you through it. This is the personal essay part, right? This is the more traditional essay that students have been preparing for. Now, the reason I show this is because we didn't expect this last year. We didn't expect that they would change the way they format the essay. And nonetheless, students were prepared with all the skills they needed. And we anticipate that even if Hunter changes the format a little bit, they're still essentially asking the same question a different way. So the question that many of you had, how do we prepare? I wanted to show you guys a little bit of some of the things that I've loved to do in my classes that help us build different skills that we use in the writing portion. So one example is we give a short story, a very broad and vague one. Here I have a woman walked in the building, she looked around, the room was dark, it was difficult to see. Another woman came in, she walked to the window, blah, blah, blah. And then I give my students time to write a story about this. Give it context, give it details, and on top I wrote characters, setting, plot, emotions, right? This helps us practice the creative writing and build vocabulary and imagination skills, details, and descriptive language. Sometimes it's easier to do it on a story that's not yours, rather than also balancing the personal elements. So I tried to separate the different elements that are needed in this essay and practice each one separately before we put them together so it doesn't overwhelm. So this is just one example. We practice organizing our thoughts and structuring our essay by first breaking it up if we need to. That's tough at first to write a fully structured essay. So if we can split it up and maybe write it in bullet points or in different sections, we can then put it all together. We learn different writing styles and sentence structures. This is a really fun handout that I like to give. It shows us the value of varying our sentence lengths. So I'll read it kind of quickly. This sentence has 5 words. Here are 5 more words. 5-word sentences are fine, but several together become monotonous. Listen to what is happening. The writing is getting boring. The sound of it drones. It's like a stuck record. The ear demands some variety. Now listen. I vary the sentence length and I create music. Music. The writing sings. It has a pleasant rhythm, a lilt, a harmony. I use short sentences, and I use sentences of medium length. And sometimes, when I'm certain the reader is rested, I engage him with a sentence of considerable length, a sentence that burns with energy and builds with all the impetus of a crescendo, the roll of the drums, the crash of the cymbals, something that says, listen to this. This is important. So, write with a combination of short, medium, and long sentences. Create a sound that pleases the reader's ears. Don't just write words, write music. It's a short tidbit, but I do we do it once in a while where we look at some of our essays and we do take a highlighter and, highlight in one color our short, our long, our medium sentences and really show how we can vary these up to make it sound better. We also build our own checklists. So this on my left is an example of a checklist that was created by my students in class. We'll ask, and this is just a short excerpt of it. We have made this go on for pages and pages. And we know that it's going to be impossible to memorize or come in with a full checklist of everything I need in my essay. But we put one together in class so we all remember the elements. And we can use it in our homework essays, for example. And it's a very collaborative project with the students as well, which has been very successful in the past. We learn how to use transition words effectively, right? We practice this in our grammar homeworks and lessons and, learn how to diversify our language, something that you use in homework, in school, everywhere. And these small changes can make a big difference. We also think about how this helps our reading portion of the exam. We can understand a passage better when we know how it transitions from one part to the next. In school, you may have written essays in the past that say that, start with first, something, something, second, third, in conclusion. But what if instead of saying in conclusion, you say all in all, or in summation, to wrap up, in short. And then instead of saying, first, second, third, You can say furthermore, moreover, in addition, etc. Right? So we learn different types of words. We switch up our transitions, and they make a big difference to how the essay can sound, even just changing one word. And so another question that came up a couple of times, how do we prepare if we don't know what to write about? So we talk about a lot of strategies in our classes of how to avoid writer's block and how to be prepared for any topic. Here is a not complete list, but some of the examples of the topics from prior years. And throughout our course, we will have written essays on, I believe, almost all of these topics. Describe the everyday superhero, describe a moment you felt challenged and why, describe someone who inspires you, a journey through New York City, a meaningful lesson that you learned at school, a part of New York City you feel emotionally connected to. And I believe that there's plenty more that we talked through. And one of my other worksheets is just a list of all of the prompts and ask students to just give a brief description of how would you have answered this, right? What would be your topic? And if we practice, answering every topic, it becomes a little bit easier. And you can reuse one topic for different questions. And we talk about that a lot. And my best strategy that I always encourage students to do with their parents as well is create this kind of a T-chart, basically, of people, places, things, and lessons. And I say pull inspiration from, your family, your friends, and so forth. I say come up with a list of people that you can write about. Maybe it's your grandma who you remember that you love to cook with in the kitchen. Maybe it's your coach that really, instilled in you the value of working hard and being a team player. Think of important places to you, places in New York City, places outside of New York City, fictional places, and the significance it holds. So maybe it's your favorite soccer field where you scored the winning goal in your championship. Maybe it's, your favorite park where you always go with your dog. Think of things that hold value to you. I'm using the same soccer example just to show that you can use it for every single possible essay, but it's the first cleats that I got from my coach. Maybe it's an heirloom from my family or something. Maybe it's a stuffed animal that I've had since I was born, and so forth. And lessons that I would have learned. What's a lesson I learned in school? What's a lesson I learned outside of school? So forth. So we try to prepare by having as lengthy of a list as possible of possible topics to write about. So day of the exam, I'm not scrambling thinking, oh no, what was my favorite part of New York? I will have already probably written an essay about it. Or I will at least have had the topic used in a different essay that I can use here. So I hope that makes sense. Happy to answer any more questions about that as well, but this is just one strategy. Our goal is that by the exam, students are prepared with everything that they need so that they're not going into the essay blind. And that's tough in the beginning, especially the beginning, when we still think about, well, what could I write about? What do I even want to showcase about myself? And so forth. But after time, we have, and as a practice prompt also said, okay, let's pick one thing about ourselves. Take being a soccer player and plug it into every single prompt, right? Not that you should necessarily write your essay about it, but know that you can have something to rely on even if everything goes wrong, right? My everyday superhero is my mom who wakes up really early in the morning to make me lunch and brings snacks for my teammates and drives me to practice and blah, blah, blah. A moment I felt challenged was, when a moment I felt challenged was when I lost a really big game and it was my fault and how I came back from it and my team supported me, so on and so forth. My coach inspires me. My journey to, practice every day and how I have to finish my homework in my car and so forth. a meaningful lesson that I learned, maybe the lesson of teamwork and passing the ball when I need to. And a part of New York City that I feel emotionally connected to. Maybe it's the field that I play on every day, so on and so forth. This is just an example. And lastly, some more ways that we prepare. We try to write new essays every week, or if not in the beginning of the Kweller course, because like I said, sometimes in the beginning, we're really focused on getting the math and reading to a stable level. We introduce essays towards the end. We also revisit and revise old essays. And I think that they're a really great inspiration because it's something that you already wrote. So you already know it well, and it's a lot easier than asking you to start from scratch. And you can self-improve your writing, realize what you did wrong, and so forth. Review the detailed feedback provided. That's something really important, that you spend the time to look at it. I've had students that sometimes just, look at their score and say, oh, I did better, I did worse. And at some point I said, let's not even give a numerical score, because the point is for you to look at the comments and really focus on what have I improved on and what could I continue to improve on. We read strong examples and weak examples and have students analyze strengths and weaknesses, which I think is important. We discuss potential topics with students, both do's and don'ts, what you should, what you shouldn't talk about, and develop our skills as writers. Writers not just for this essay, but writing for all of the writing we will do in high school and beyond, because it is something that will come very quickly, and it has, I'm sure you're already writing, whether it's essays or short responses in school already. Thank you so much. I know that was a lot. So let me go through the questions, and thank you all for tuning in today for this essay webinar. I'll go through and answer some of your questions. Yeah. Okay. Okay. What is the most important part that counts on the test? Essay, multiple choice for ELA, or essay, multiple choice for math? So I talked about this more in the beginning of the session, but it's very hard to say. There is no single section that is weighed more, and it's a pretty complicated system, as I explained, that really shows that each section is equally important. There is no one section that is necessarily weighed more than the rest. Like I said, the essay is the final test of that, of the admission or not, but to even get there, the multiple choice already has to be very strong. So go back to the prior year examples. These are some of the prior year examples. And yeah, and otherwise, thank you all so much for tuning in. I'm happy to stay back to answer more questions. But otherwise, thank you guys so much, and hope to see you all around Kweller. And like I said, I took the Hunter test, I passed the Hunter test, I attended Hunter, and I loved it. So if there's any questions about the school itself, otherwise, I'm always happy to talk about it. So thank you.
Can I ask a question?